Okay, good morning. It's October 2022, and what we want to do today, this is Corvette Power Top Service. My name's John Shell. I've got 14 videos on YouTube to help you with your power top. And what we're going to do today is the 56 and the 57 power top main wiring harness is a little bit of tension to put in. They did things differently in 56 and 57 than they did from 58 to 62. So we're going to go over this wiring diagram, and I'm going to try to help you make putting a main wiring harness from the rear of the car to the front of the car to the switch maybe a little bit easier for you. We'll be taking some breaks within the video to get things lined up and laid out, so I hope I can do this video without any confusion, but I do have a new wiring harness laying on the table that we're going to go over. Okay, so we're going to check out here for a second, get the sign out of the way, and we'll be right back. Okay, here we are again with this 56 from Mr. Balta from Pennsylvania that I restored his power top. I also put a new wiring harness in it. You know, one thing I want to share with you on, a lot of guys don't want to put new wiring harnesses in their car. They say my wiring harness looks good, which it might, but one thing that I've come across in a car that might be hidden from your view is, look at this main wiring harness that was in a car. See how Bubba here spliced some wires together and just twisted them together? He didn't solder them or nothing, and this was a main wiring harness. This was hidden from view. So that's why I do recommend, after 67 years, it's best to put a new wiring harness in the car. What we're going to do here is try to take you step by step to put a wiring harness in a 56, 57. The first thing that needs to happen is this cover, this gas tank cover needs to come out of there. And you got a bunch of screws around here. This is usually glued, and you lift that up. The cavity that we're going to work with is way down under this panel right here. It's hard to even get your hand down in there because you have gas lines coming. But to put a wiring harness in one of these cars, you want to start right here in the middle and work forward and work backwards. To work I always work backwards first. And if the wiring harness, if the old wiring harness is in the car, it might help you and it may not help you. This cavity right here is sometimes in your fender area, has glue in it, and can be kind of tough getting a cable down through there that would drop down into this area to hook up your wiring harness that goes to the rear. These clips have to come off the wiring harness. I use a tool. Guess I dropped it on the ground here. Oh, here it is. I use a little spade tool like this. You can get them online to get in here and release that clip and pull those wires out of there. I would recommend you taking a picture of that so you make sure that you do get it back in here. You notice we got our, this is not a 56 wiring harness, this is a 57. So the 56 is a little bit different, but 57, you got a little notch there, but I would recommend taking some pictures. But right here would be the middle of the cavity, okay? Right here. These wires right here hook to that switch, but they are underneath the gas tank cover. And they protrude out from underneath this well down in here. And the only way you can get to it is the cover has to come off. Okay, take a break there. Okay, we're in the trunk area here on this 56. And where the pointer is pointing, this is where the original main wiring harness came out of. But they must have glued that up in there. And I've tried to pull them out before, and it's impossible. And I don't want to try to get a Dremel up in there or a drill up in there because of this low area. I sure wouldn't want to poke a hole through the fiberglass and damage the paint. So I just clip it off right there. And same way in the area that we just got done talking about, where we're starting in the middle, I just clip that main wiring harness off. I tried to pull this one out and it would not come. Now we're going to try to fish this up through this area here of your fender and feed it down into that cavity. This one was fairly easy to do. I just slipped that cable up in there and kept pushing on it, and it came right into the cavity, which sometimes is not quite easy. I've even had to take a 1/4 inch copper tubing and kind of ram back and forth to make a passageway in there. Once you get the passageway in, as I mentioned with this wiring harness here, these clips have to come off. And this has to be as thin as possible to hook on to the cable and pull it back through. I would recommend even putting grease on it. That does help. So you would want to do something like this with the clips off. You'd want to maybe start up there, tape, tape, tape. Maybe even come back this way a little bit further, put some grease on it. And if one person works back here and the other person works in the cavity, you can work it back and forth and ease it through. The factory, from the when they put these into the factory, come around over here, Chris. Before they put this body on here, they had the floor and they had the wheel wells, and they draped that wiring harness over the wheel well down into the cavity here, and then there is a small hole down here in this cavity that has a little rubber grommet on it. That hole's only about an inch wide. And then they brought it along the rocker panel, and right in here there is a metal gusset. And this is the difficult part to get the wiring harness through going forward. We're going to deal with that in a little bit, but there is that gusset there. And then on up in behind the hinge pillar, there is another 1-inch hole drilled where the wiring harness comes out and then feeds over the dash to the switch. But coming back to the rear of the car, this is the main thing, is making that wiring as thin as possible, getting you a cavity. Like I say, even 1/4 inch copper tubing works pretty good. On this car, I used this type of plastic coated wire, and it worked real good. You can still see some of my electric tape there. So working it back and forth, so not pulling on it in any way, but tugging, but pulling it back and forth with ease, with grease on it. I've never failed to get one through. Okay, let's take a break there. Hey, I was going to go forward, but we're going to stay in the trunk area a little bit. I want to show you the routing of these hoses around here. And this is an original 56 connector for your main wiring harness to the solenoid valves. In 57, the 62, they used this type right here. This is a better type, to tell you the truth. But we have, once I got it through the cavity here, you can see that it's coming up and around like that. It's where it's coming. And we're tucking it in behind the tower, and we're bringing it over in behind the motor pump mount, bringing this wiring up to the switches, and then this safety switch here, we're bringing that wiring behind the tower and hooking it to here. This right here, Chris, get this one in here. This is the ground wire for the pump on a 5657. Notice back in here, it is screwed to the pump mount, and it's coming behind the tower over here, and it is mounting to this bumper brace right here. I think it's a very poor idea, but they mounted that to a bumper brace for a ground. A ground is very important in these cars, and sometimes I recommend guys running a wire all the way from the pump mount or the back of the solenoid and taping it to the main wiring harness. They're feeding forward, and actually taking it all the way to the engine block or the valve cover or something like that to make sure you have a bad ground. You don't want to put this in. You don't want to put this in and then have to string maybe a ground wire later. So yeah, that's just a good idea that I have run into down through the years, is bad ground on these cars. So I think we're done here now. Notice I have the hoses. I have these hoses made special. They're a little bit longer than the original ones, or the ones you can buy from your convertible top places. I have a company that makes them. They make my motors for me too. This motor is more powerful than an original motor. That's why you can see in this top, when I put it top down, it just jerks it right off the top of that windshield frame, where an original motor might not do that, just the old technology. So I think we're going to wind up back here. We went over the switches. I don't see anything else, so we'll go forward now. Okay, we're back in the middle of the car. We've talked about this cavity with the gas tank cover being taken off. That cavity down in there, if you get a pencil flashlight, yeah, you can see it down in there. It's got about a 1-inch hole that has a grommet on it. If the original wiring harness is in the car yet, I would recommend clipping it there and then putting the cable onto the original wiring harness and pulling it through. Now, to pull it through, we have talked about this metal gusset in here. And this metal gusset, from what I've never seen one, I just know it's there. It's real, there's no passageway down here, but the metal gusset may not fit against the floorboard up here in a higher area. So this is where we want to get through, is in this higher area. Well, with this cable, it's basically going to lay on the bottom as you pull it through. So what I don't like to do, but what we probably will have to do, come around here now, Chris, is make a little window. Make a little window underneath the carpet. I would recommend cutting a slot that wide and maybe 3 inches long right here. Can you get that? Yep. Right here in this area. And if you use a Dremel real thin cutter, you can cut that piece of fiberglass and it'll fit right back in, and you can glue it with no problem. But with that little window, as we have pulled this wiring harness through, I can put my finger and hold that wiring harness up to the top to feed it through that area, which makes it a lot easier. So that little window would be right along this edge here, about an inch in width, something like that right there. Don't have to go clear up into here, but right in here, and it will definitely help you because, like I said, down at the bottom, it doesn't seem like there's any space, but you come up to the top, and the wiring still has to be pretty thin, but it's a lot easier to lift that wiring harness up through that little window and get your hand back in here where it comes out through that hole. And again, greasing it, putting grease on it, and working it back and forth. So that will help you a lot. I know you don't maybe want to cut a window in it, and that's your prerogative. It can take me up to 5 hours to put one of these wiring harnesses in through the rocker panel and through the rear end. So 5-6 hours. Yeah, I've done 3 of them now. Now, let's say that the car does not have the wiring harness in it, the old wiring harness in this area down in here. What I have done is I have fed the copper tubing through the hole, and I have just a roll of copper tubing, 1/4 inch, and I have fed it through the rocker panel, and it had come right up through that hole, and I can take my clips off. This is the front part of it here. I can take the clips off. The 56 did not have your fuses here, okay? They just had wires. So, but these clips have to come off. We got to make it as thin as possible, and I take the wire that goes to the circuit breaker, and I feed that backwards. I feed it backwards. I don't try to feed it forward with the rest of this because I'm trying to get it as thin as possible. So if I can get this through there, through the hole up there behind the hinge pillar, then through that little window, I can grab a hold of this, and because this right here has to go through there separately. I wouldn't try to pull it through with the whole wiring harness again because it seems to be too thick. So again, putting little pieces of tape on there to hold it, to feed it through till I get to the little window, and then cutting it loose, and then I can work this through that cavity there by the gusset. So once I get it through, then I can drape it over the radio speaker, the radio, take it on over to where the speedometer cable is, and route it down in through there to go to your push and pull switch. So I think I've covered everything that needs to be said on this. Again, the important thing is getting it through this gusset area, and it seems like it goes through easier when the wiring harness is lifted up more towards the top. If it's down at the bottom, must not be much room in there, and it won't pull through. So I hope this has helped you. Oh, I want to deal with this switch. We talked about those springs on those switches here, so they won't stick. And we talked about those there, and we talked about the ones in the front divider. Now this is the switch right here. They're all the same, except this one here has a shorter arm and has a hole in it, okay? But what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to get this switch to stick, okay? I can get them, they may work 6-7 times perfect, and then all of a sudden they'll stick. So let's just see here. There, it's stuck. And if it sticks, the top will not work. With the spring-loaded deal I got, look at that. Stuck again. Yep, stuck again. Stuck again. So I've had these switches apart. I've tweaked them. I've done everything except you can't buy them. I've looked online to try to get a replacement of some sort, Kohlhurst, many different, and I cannot find anything. Yes, they make toggle switches, but there she worked. See, it's working. There she's stuck again. I can't find anything that I can use to replace this one. They were not a very good bulletproof switch. I've had these break off of this down in here before, so I do have some extra ones. They're hard to come by unless you maybe buy a whole unit or whatever. But anyway, that's the switch that they used, and I'm glad they came out with something different in 57 to 62, because I can find those, and just a lot better switch. So I sure hope you learned something from this video. Have any questions or anything, you know, my phone number is on the sign. I've answered a lot of questions for restoration shops. They send me their units. If you would like to bring your car to me, I used to go to people's houses and put them in and everything. I'm not doing that anymore. But if you would want to have your car repaired, possibly could make an appointment to bring it to my house. And usually I'd have your car maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks. So hope this helps you out with your 56, 57. Have a good day, and I wish I had some power, but I do work on power tops. Thank you. Have a great day.